Okay, once again, to try and get you acclimated to XML, I want to take you through the idea of how you do XML, but I want to take you through it in a kind of a symbolic or abstract way, not really how we're going to do XML, but I want to show you how to build up to the concept of what XML is about. The first step is create a set of names. Figure out for a particular information context, and as I've kind of bandied about before, this idea of an information context is a situation. For example, we'll take the situation of a text that we want to represent, model, produce, and distribute. Right? So we start with that context, and you'll always have some context, some kind of situation that you want to work with. And in this case, we're going to use a composition as a model. So we're going to create. We start by creating a set of names that describe the parts and pieces of that composition or whatever the situation is. We define parent and child relationships between those names. We wrap the names in XML syntax, and that's pretty much it. That's what it takes to do XML. So when you're doing word processing, it's a process of open the word processing application, begin to type, apply formatting, that sort of thing. In our case, ooh, that guy just wiped out. In our case, it's going to be a matter of starting with the names of things, and that I want you to take through this entire course as a core concept, a core competency, and a core figuring out how those names fit together. Extremely important. It's the basis of all of the work that we're going to do here. Coming up with a good set of names that are descriptive, that end users can work with, that architects can work with, and that can fully define the context of the situation that you want to work with. Okay, so let's run through an example here. The example that's on your screen right now. We have a composition. Step one, we create a set of names. So obviously the name composition is a good one for us to use. It's something that we're going to be working with. And compositions have titles. And now notice the usage of the word have. I want you to pay specific attention to that have or has word, because it's going to be very helpful to us later on in deciding which items are parents and which items are children. So we have a composition. The composition, in turn, has a title, an author, an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Okay, so we're going to start out with that simple set of names. Is that the ultimate set of names for composition? I think you can see clearly that it's not the ultimate set of names, but it's a decent starting place. It's a place for us to get going and start to think about the idea of a composition. And we can complicate it later as we need to. And in fact, we're going to complicate it one step further right now by deciding, oh gosh, I guess that the idea of an introduction, body, and conclusion isn't sufficient, because the introduction, body, and conclusion have a set of paragraphs that go with them. So we have these block units of information, paragraph, 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 and every introduction, body, and conclusion also has a paragraph. Okay, so the bodies and conclusions have paragraphs. And notice that those paragraphs are now indented. And so I'm going to give a little bit more structure here. So now we have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different elements, 7 different names that define a composition. Okay, and we're going to go one step further by looking at this and say, well, we really can't get away without putting a first and a last name for the author. For example, because I know later on that I want to sort these compositions by the last name of the author. And so I'm going to need to capture that information. I'm going to need to have that as part of my name set or namespace. So we have a space or a set of names that are defining a composition, and so far all I've done is list them, and now I'm also going to indent them. I'm going to indent them based on this idea of what has what. The composition has a title, the composition has an author, the author has a first and a last name. The composition has an introduction, the introduction has a paragraph. Okay, so do you get the idea? We're creating nesting. We're creating parents and children. The grandparent of all others is the composition. And that makes sense because we're modeling a composition. That composition is at the root, and all of the different branches from there on are going to be somehow related to that composition. Furthermore, the composition has an author, and the author has two set of paragraphs, and it could be one or more paragraphs under there. Okay, so far so good. This should be pretty straightforward. What we're doing is not the hard part. Deciding on the right set of names and getting those names exactly to be the ones that you need to work with, and the minimum set of names that will do the job, that's the hard part. Okay, and then finally, the last step is really a mechanical step. It's convert our set of names into syntax. And the two big pieces of syntax that we're going to obey here is the idea that every tag that opens must close, and that all tags are enclosed in angle brackets. Okay, those two constraints. Aside from that, we really simply have the same set of names that we've come up with before, and now we're going to wrap them in XML syntax so that they can be used by an XML system. So the first thing that you'll notice is really straightforward. Every tag has angle brackets around it. And there's only one other weird thing going on, and that's with the /. So in addition to every tag having angle brackets around it, that's rule number 1, tags that open must close. We distinguish an open tag from a closed tag with these slashes. So you'll see that the very first tag is composition, and the very last tag is also composition, but it's preceded by the /. That means it's the close tag of the composition. Similarly, we have an open author tag with no slashes, and a close author tag that has a slash before it. Now there's one other use of slash that I want to go over. Notice the tag title. The tag title has no close tag, or so it seems. In fact, the title tag is a self-closing tag, and that's indicated by the fact that the / comes after the word title. Okay, this is the first of many kind of arbitrarily, weird rules that we're going to make up for how you represent things. This is a rule of XML that says, when do you use a /? And in this position, the / means A. In that position, it means B. Okay, so the two rules that we followed in order to make this composition work is every tag that opens must close, and every tag must have angle brackets around it. And we've come up with two different ways of closing tags. The first one is to have a close tag that repeats the word of the open tag and includes the / before the word. And the second one is to have a self-closing or empty tag that has the slash after it. Okay, so that's a very simple model of compositions, and I'm hoping you're completely dissatisfied by that model, because there's a lot of things that model doesn't help us with or doesn't address at all. It's a very simple model for what it's worth, but there's way more stuff that we'll cover over the rest of this course that are the but what abouts. Like, for example, what if I want more than one paragraph in the body? How do I say that? What if I only want to allow one paragraph? Like, the introduction can be one paragraph, and the body can be multiple paragraphs. How do I begin to say that in this model? No way to deal with that. We haven't covered the optional. So we haven't covered the number of tags that can repeat. We haven't covered whether a tag is required or optional. It doesn't say in that representation of a composition whether that's possible or not. Can any kind of information count as an author name? What if I type in January 17th, 1963 inside the author first name? Is that okay? Probably not, right? There's not many authors that have that as their first name. So how am I stopped from doing that? In this model so far, I'm not stopped from doing that. So these are all the limitations of the simple model. The simple model is great for getting you started, but I want to show you where we need to go. What if the author has 3 names or no first name? How do I represent that? How do I take that into account? Is that something I need to take into account? Well, I have authors that have names that are non-standard Western names that aren't first, last? Quite possibly, or quite even probably so. How am I going to take that into account? How am I going to do that? And of course, there's a ton of other enhancements. We could have footnotes, we could have subtitles, we could have chapter headings, whatever. I mean, we could have a much more sophisticated composition. The one thing that I will give you, the one piece of insight that I think is a really good piece of advice that you can carry through the rest of your career in modeling is, don't complicate your model until you're forced to. Begin with a simple model and add enhancements as you recognize the absolute need to do that, rather than trying to account for every possible situation up front. So the model that I created here is a very good starting point, and you'll be necessarily forced into creating more and more enhancements, more and more names, more and more relationships between tags to further and further specify the structure of your compositions. Okay, now the final thing is, what about formatting? Right? It had all those angle brackets and slashes in it? Probably not, right? How are we going to get it to look like a composition? That's the whole subject of transforms, and that's something that we'll cover later in the class. Okay, so we will get through all of this stuff eventually, and what I want you to take home here is, the key thing to beginning and doing XML is coming up with the right names and the way those names nest within each other, the parent and child structure. And B, there's a lot more nuance, there's a lot more things that go on besides simply naming them and putting inside of each other.